So we are now at part 3 of our Viking chair build, which brings us to this machine here, which is called an edge jointer. Now an edge jointer is basically used to joint edges. That's what we use it here anyways. So if we have a board like so, we have a face, 2 faces, edge, 2 edges, and 2 ends. So it's not an end jointer. We never put it on the machine like this and run it through. It would just chatter and do a whole bunch of things because people have tried that before. Don't do that. You can use it to plane face of your board, but that's actually pretty dangerous. So we don't really generally do that either because we have a surface planer. So we'll leave that task up to the surface planer. We mainly use it to joint an edge, and only one edge. It's basically a machine that's not used for much other than that in this school, but you can do other things with it. So to get a nice, beautiful straight edge is the sole purpose, and then to take it to the table saw and put that edge against the rip fence. Okay? Now, safety, of course, is number 1. We've talked before about safety, but I want to remind you that you want to be nice, neat, and tidy. Nothing hanging out, no shirts, no lanyards, nothing, because this is at a height of mid-thigh, and anything that gets into this cutter head will tangle up and pull you in, potentially hurting you very bad. So other than getting pulled into the machine, the other thing that can happen is your fingers or your hands can slip and go into the cutter head, and that's another no-no. So we're going to talk about hand placement as well when we start talking about how to actually use the machine. The setup for this machine. So first of all, let's talk about the parts of the machine. Not all the parts, just the parts you need to know. This is your in-feet table. This is your in-feet table height adjustment crank. This is your out-feet table and the out-feet height adjustment crank. Never touch this. This out-feet table is set up to the same height as the highest point of that cutter head, so we don't want to touch that. In fact, it might even be locked, so you can't. This is our cutter head, and this is our cutter head spring-loaded guard. Cutter head guard, I'd be good with that end. So here's a quick look at the cutter head and the cutter head guard. If you pull back the cutter head guard, then you can take a look at the cutter head, and the cutter head is composed of 3 knives that are on a cylinder, and they cut in a clockwise direction. Never touch that with your fingers. You never know when the power might go on. I can't even turn it all the way around, but there's 3 of these knives that spin towards towards yourself or clockwise against the direction of the wood. So the top of this knife is set to the exact same height to the top of the out-feet table. So that's why we never touch the out-feet table. We only adjust the in-feet table. And even for the most part, this has been adjusted, so you don't have to worry about that as well. This is what it looks like running. This is our guide fence. And our on-off, that's probably all you really need to know at this point. Now the machine should be set up for you already, and if you don't think it is, you can always come and get me. And we check that the guide fence is 90 degrees to your in-feet and out-feet table. And we check that we're taking off approximately a 32nd of an inch, so not very much in this case. Now once the machine is set up, we talk about the board, making sure the board is set up properly and you're ready to put that through. Now, I do have a piece of maple here that I am going to be edge jointing for the Viking chair. And this piece actually is a good piece to show you, because you want the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you have the concave side down. So if you take it and you can put it right on top of the guide fence, and if it has a gap on the ends, looks like a boat, that's no good, because it'll rock, and it rocks through the machine, and then it doesn't do the proper cut. We want the concave side down, so I'm going to flip that over, and I want it to be nice and solid like that. If anything, there can be a gap in the middle, and that's fine. Now ideally we would want a nice straight board, but this machine is for fixing this problem, to get this nice and straight. The other thing you want to look at on your board is grain direction. And it's hard to show you on this board. This is actually curly maple, and the grain's all over the place. So I went and got a piece of oak. Now the piece of oak kind of shows you a little bit nicer the grain direction. Now the cutter head cuts towards you in this fashion. And because it's cutting towards you in this fashion, when it comes up and cuts the bottom side of the board, you want the grain to be going up and away from the board so that it doesn't cause chip out. So if I was to draw the lines, these are the grain direction, and it's kind of going up and away. That's the way we'd want to put it through. So concave side down, and then the grain direction going up and away. Now I'm exaggerating when I draw those lines. If you have it going the other way, like so, if we flip the board, the grain is now going down into the cutter head, and that will grab the end of that cutter head as it comes around. It'll grab the end of the grain, and it'll chip out, and it'll just not make for a very nice cut. Now, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you put it through this way and it chips out, so just turn it around and put it through again this way, and maybe you won't get chip out. But for the most part, when you're looking, you want the concave side down and the grain going up and away. Some boards, the grain is absolutely straight. Can't worry about that one. Sometimes the grain goes up and down and up and down and up and down. Can't worry about that one. You're going to put it through. If you start hearing a whole bunch of chip out, just turn it around and put it through the other way. Alrighty, so let's get set up. I'll show you about hand placement, body placement, and how to push the board through the machine. So where should we stand when we use this machine? Well, I like to stand starting in front of the in-feed table, and as I'm using the machine, I like to kind of shuffle through it a little bit, kind of a shuffle step, a little bit of a edge jointer dance. And what that does is it allows me to, especially if I have a long board, not lean over top of the board, and it allows me to keep my pressure on the front of the board. Whereas if I didn't do that, then my pressure is going to be on that back hand. So it looks something like this. Let's just make sure I have the concave side down. I do. So I start here, hand position, left hand, like so, with my fingers up nice and high. You can see here. These fingers are keeping it nice and tight against the guide fence, and the back hand is closer to the back of the board, and it has it where the thumb is keeping it nice and tight against the guide fence. We always hover over the top, okay? That way we know our hands are nice and high and out of the blade, the cutter head. So the shuffle dance looks something like this. Hand position placement like so. We always make sure that our board isn't touching the cutter head when we start the machine. This cutter head guard should be snapped back all the way, and we would turn it on, and then we'd push it through, keeping our weight on the front, and I just kind of walk through it, a little bit of shuffle, and push it through. If I need to go again, especially if it's a very concave side, then I just do it again. I put it back, tight against that guide fence, assume position, and then walk it through. The shuffle step jointer dance. So let's see what that sounds like and looks like with the machine on. Normally I'd have the vents on, but one or two passes, that'll be just fine, and you can hear the machine a little bit better. So we'll turn that on. Whenever you're using equipment, try, especially the table saw, the jointer, try to bring the board around the blade so you don't drop it on top of that cutter head. I know I keep on calling it a blade, but it's a cutter head. I had a little bit of jointing here and a little bit of jointing here, but none in the middle. It just means I have to put it through again until I have jointing going along the total edge. So let's do that again, maybe 2 times. this one more time, and you can see that I've jointed that whole edge. A little bit here, but mostly that's done. If it sits nice and straight on that top of that guide fence, I can't see light through it, then it's good enough to go and put against the table. It doesn't rock, that's what I want. No rock and no light through the table saw. So that it doesn't, basically the reason we want that nice and straight is as I'm putting it through the table saw, like so, it doesn't twist and turn on me, because that would be very dangerous. And that brings us to the end of the edge jointer. Let's learn about the next step, which is the table saw.